What's up, knowledge seekers? Welcome back to another eye-opening episode where we dive into perspectives you might not hear in the classroom. Today we're exploring Professor Wilfred Reilly's thought-provoking book, Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me, a response to the classic, Lies My Teacher Told Me, but from a completely different angle. Now listen, this isn't about picking sides. It's about examining all angles of history, not just the ones that fit neatly into today's popular narratives. Think about it. When was the last time you heard someone say, you know what, this complex historical situation is complicated? Not exactly headline material, right? Reilly's core argument is that while Jim Loewen's original book correctly pointed out problematic omissions in traditional textbooks, we're now overcorrected. We equally simplified the narratives from the opposite direction. Today we're diving into 5 of the most compelling counterpoints that might just change how you view American history. Before we jump in, a quick reminder, I'm not here to tell you what to think. My goal is to present these alternative perspectives so that you can decide what makes sense. Ready? Let's go. First up, was the Red Scare just a mass hysteria? Reilly challenges the common classroom narrative that it was all paranoia with no substance. The standard story, McCarthy was just a power-hungry fearmonger, seeing communists under every bed. But let's dig deeper into what Reilly uncovered. In 1995, the US government declassified the Verona Papers, intercepted Soviet communications that confirmed extensive espionage networks operating within America. These documents verified that figures like Alger Hiss and the Rosenbergs weren't victims of paranoia, they were actually Soviet agents. Reilly specifically highlights the Hollywood situation. The conventional narrative suggests innocent creative types were baselessly persecuted, but Reilly cites evidence that the Communist Party USA had deliberately targeted Hollywood for infiltration. According to Soviet archives opened after the Cold War, at least 300 Hollywood figures were actual Communist Party members and close affiliates during this period. Studio executive Dor Shari admitted in private correspondence that the Hollywood 10, often portrayed as innocent victims, were indeed party members. Let's get into specifics, what Reilly highlights. Writer Dalton Trumbo, one of the Hollywood 10, wasn't just a casual sympathizer, he was a card-carrying Communist Party member. The number was 47187. He actively supported Stalin during the Hitler-Stalin Pact when many other leftists broke with the Soviet Union. After his blacklisting, Trumbo admitted, "I'm a communist, but I've never been a traitor." Reilly points out films like Mission to Moscow that portrayed Stalin's show trials, where thousands were executed as legitimate justice. This wasn't just artistic expression, it was deliberate propaganda coordinated with Soviet agents, according to the documents Reilly cites. Now, does this justify all the McCarthy tactics? Absolutely not. His methods were often reckless and damaged innocent lives. The point Reilly makes is more nuanced. While McCarthy himself was problematic, the underlying concern about Soviet infiltration wasn't completely fabricated, as often portrayed in classrooms. After studying the Verona decrypts, we now know that many of those named by McCarthy actually were Soviet agents. Reilly argues this complexity gets lost when it's reduced the entire period to nothing but baseless paranoia. Next up is Native American history. Many classrooms present a simplified narrative of peaceful people living in perfect harmony before the Europeans arrived. Reilly argues this well-intentioned portrayal actually diminishes the incredible diversity and complexity of hundreds of distinct civilizations with vastly different cultures, governance systems, and military traditions. Let's get specific. The Aztec Empire, which controlled much of Mesoamerica, conquered neighboring peoples and demanded tribute payments, including human sacrifice. The Comanche, whose horseback warriors dominated the southern plains for centuries, built a powerful empire through military conquest and raiding. What does Reilly actually cite here? Archaeological evidence showing many tribes engaged in warfare, maintained slavery systems, and developed sophisticated political hierarchies, just like the civilizations across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Take the Iroquois Confederacy. They had an advanced political system with complex checks and balances that actually influenced the U.S. Constitution. Ben Franklin explicitly studied their governance model when developing ideas for American federalism. Or consider the Hoika near modern-day St. Louis, a Native American city that at its peak around 1200 CE had a larger population than London at the time. Archaeological evidence suggests they practiced human sacrifice and maintained strict social hierarchies. Reilly points out this complex civilization is barely mentioned in most textbooks. Reilly spends considerable time discussing how tribes like the Cherokee adopted elements of European culture, including plantation, agriculture, and yes, even chattel slavery. By 1860, the Cherokee Nation had approximately 4,600 slaves. During the forced relocation, wealthy Cherokee slaveholders brought their enslaved people with them, a complexity rarely mentioned in textbooks. Reilly does, quote, dragging canoe of Cherokee who oppose land secessions to white settlers, declaring, "You have bought fair land, but you will find its settlement dark and bloody." This warrior led raids on frontier settlements for decades. Reilly contrasts this with peaceful resistance of leaders like Chief Joseph of the Nez Prince, illustrating the diversity of approaches Native leaders took. His point isn't to disparage Native Americans, it's to recognize them as fully human historical actors, with the same capacity for both nobility and flaws that all human societies demonstrate. Reilly suggests that treating Native Americans as a one-dimensional figure frozen in time is not just historically inaccurate, it denies them their rightful place as sophisticated participants in world history. Now let's tackle the big one. The Southern strategy. Southern narrative, Republicans deliberately appealed to racism to flip the South from Democrat to Republican. Here's where Reilly gets controversial. He doesn't deny racism existed in politics, that would be absurd, but he challenges the simplistic explanation taught in many classrooms by diving into the actual voting data. First, the timeline issue. If the Southern strategy was primarily about exploiting racial resentment, after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as commonly taught, Reilly asks why the South didn't go fully Republican until the 90s, nearly 3 decades later. Let's look at the numbers. In 1976, Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, won every Southern state except Virginia. As late as 1992, Bill Clinton won Georgia, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky. These voting patterns don't neatly fit into the standard narrative of the immediate racial backlash. Even more telling, Reilly points out that Democrats maintained control of most of Southern state legislatures well into the 90s, even the 2000s. Georgia legislature didn't flip Republican until 2004, the Arkansas legislature until 2012. If white Southerners were voting primarily based on race, why did they keep electing Democrats locally for decades? Reilly points to the economic transformation as a major factor. The South underwent massive economic development during this period, with growing aerospace, defense, and technology sectors, attracting educated professionals who traditionally leaned Republican. Atlanta, Charlotte, Houston became business hubs with economic interests that aligned with Republican policies. Take defense spending, a huge economic engine in the South. As Democrats became associated with military budget cuts after Vietnam, Southern states with major military bases and defense contractors increasingly voted Republican to protect their local economic interests. Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Fort Hood in Texas, and numerous bases in Virginia created communities economically dependent on military spending. Then there's the regional factor. Reilly highlights polling showing the South had consistently been the most religious region in America. As the Democratic Party embraced more progressive positions on social issues through the 70s and 80s, many religious Southerners, including religious black voters, found themselves increasingly aligned with Republican social conservatism. Reilly looked at the specific policy positions on gun rights. Crucial in rural Southern culture, Democrats moved towards stronger restrictions while Republicans became the party of the Second Amendment protections. On taxes and regulation, Democrats increasingly supported policies seen as hostile to small businesses and farms that dominated the Southern economy. Reilly is not saying that race played no role. That would be ridiculous. But he argues the classroom narrative that reduces this complex, decades-long political realignment to republicanism used racism to flip the South is an oversimplification that doesn't hold up to detailed historical analysis. The shift happened gradually across generations as multiple economic, religious, and policy factors reshaped Southern political identity. Here's where Reilly really changes the conventional teaching, the context of slavery. Segment 4. To be crystal clear, American slavery was brutal, dehumanizing, and moral catastrophe. But Reilly argues most classrooms miss crucial historical context that's necessary for truly understanding this institution. Let's dive in. First, the global nature of slavery. Reilly points out that virtually every civilization throughout human history practiced some form of slavery. Romans enslaved conquered people regardless of race. The Ottoman Empire maintained extensive slave markets well until the 19th century. The Arab slave trade predated the European slave trade by centuries and continued long after Western abolition. Reilly highlights something rarely taught. Britain and America were actually early leaders in the abolishment movement. While American slavery persisted until 1865, the British Empire abolished slavery in 1833. And both nations actively worked to suppress the global slave trade, including using their navies to intercept slave ships from other countries. Here's another complexity Reilly discusses: the extensive involvement in African kingdoms in the slave trade. Powerful states like Dahomey and Ashanti conducted slave raids against neighboring peoples and became wealthy trading partners with the European slavers. Reilly cites historian Henry Louis Gates, who wrote, "The sad truth is that without complex business partnerships between African elites and European traders, the slave trade to the New World would not have been possible." Gates estimates that Africans enslaved other Africans for about 1,000 years before the European contact and continued well after. Reilly explains that the modern racial conceptions didn't fully exist when the transatlantic slave trade began. Initially, enslavement was justified more by religious differences, Christians claiming the right to enslave heathens rather than by race. Racial justifications developed later to rationalize an already existing economic system. For example, the curse of Ham. Biblical justification for slavery gained prominence in the early 19th century as a post hoc rationalization. Centuries after the slave trade began, the detailed racial hierarchies and pseudo-scientific racism came even later, as the institution needed new justification. Reilly cites research estimating that only about 5% of African slaves were transported to what became the United States, with the vast majority going to Brazil and the Caribbean. Yet American education often presents slavery as primary and American phenomena. His provocative conclusion, by teaching slavery as uniquely American rather than as a widespread human rights violation that existed across civilizations, we miss both the true scale and their historical evil. The remarkable nature of the abolition movement that finally ended legal slavery across the world. Let's talk about Vietnam. Let me go back on one point about the slave trade. It's easy to dismiss a person like Wilfred Reilly until you recognize he's actually African American. Let's talk about Vietnam, a war that became shorthand for disastrous American foreign policy mistake in many classrooms. Reilly doesn't argue that Vietnam was a strategic masterpiece, but he does challenge what he sees as an oversimplified narrative. First, was it universally unpopular, is often portrayed. Reilly digs into the actual polling data and finds something surprising. For most of the war, a majority of Americans actually supported the conflict, even during the 1968 election. At the height of the anti-war protests, polls showed 48% of Americans as hawks versus 41% as doves. Support only collapsed after the 1968 Tet Offensive, when the media portrayed the U.S. military as a devastating defeat instead of the victory that it was. Reilly points out that the culturally dominant anti-war movement was primarily concentrated among college students and urban elites, not representative of the entire country. When Nixon spoke of the silent majority supporting the war, polling data suggests he wasn't entirely wrong. While Kent State and anti-war demonstrations are rightfully part of historical memory, Reilly notes that pro-war demonstrations like the 1970 Hard Hat riot in New York, where construction workers confronted anti-war protesters, gets far less attention in textbooks despite representing a significant public sentiment. What about the strategic purpose? Was it just pointless imperialism, as often suggested? Reilly argues the domino theory had legitimate concerns. After the US's withdrawal, communist forces did indeed take over Cambodia, Laos, and South Vietnam, resulting in the Cambodian genocide that killed nearly 2 million people. Reilly cites declassified Soviet and Chinese documents revealing that both the communist powers viewed Vietnam as part of a broader strategy for domination in Asia. Mao Zedong wrote in 1965 a memo to the North Vietnamese leaders, "The struggle of Vietnam is not isolated. It is a part of the world revolutionary movement." Reilly points out that while the iconic fall of Saigon helicopter evacuation images are etched in our memory, the subsequent brutality of the communist rule receives less attention in many textbooks. The new regime sent over 300,000 South Vietnamese to re-education camps where many died from torture, starvation, and disease. Finally, Reilly asks us to consider the human consequences of the American withdrawal. Over 1 million South Vietnamese allies fled as refugees in dangerous conditions, with many drowning at sea. A standard classroom narrative rarely addressed what happened to these people after the Americans left. To be clear, Reilly isn't arguing Vietnam was a good war. His point is that reducing this complex conflict to America was wrong, protesters were right, doesn't capture the genuine strategic concerns and the actual public opinion, or the complicated aftermath of conflict. I believe it's important to recognize that historical events are nuanced. And in the black and white narrative that tends to dominate American culture, what we need to do is recognize our beliefs need to be challenged. Be open to being wrong. Thank you for listening.